Okay, as you can probably tell from the title of this video, this is not the normal kind of content that I post on this YouTube channel. And I want to say first things first, I'm not trying to become a true crime YouTube channel. I'm honestly probably just going to cover this one case. As of right now, like I'm just covering this one case. Only because this is someone my mom actually knew and taught with prior to this person's disappearance. So I had seen updates happening about this case in the news recently, and my mom and I had talked about it, and I started looking to see if there was any current podcasters that have covered this case, or if there's any YouTube channels that had covered the case, and I just couldn't find really anything about her case online outside of just your typical news articles. And so I decided I would make a video about her case. Disclaimer, I'm not an investigative journalist. This is my first time doing anything like this. I don't know if I'm any good at it. I had a hard time finding some specific bits of information, and I think part of that is because some of the news articles, I was not able to access them because I am technically in the EU and not in the US, and for whatever reason, there's some sort of a law that prohibits me from accessing those in my current internet domain. And then also because I'm not an investigative journalist, I'm sure there are ways to get information out there that I just don't know about and don't know how to access because I've never done this before. So that being said, as we come to them, I will mention some things that I have questions about that I just couldn't find answers for. That being said, today I'm going to tell you about the case of Peggy Sweeten, and her case is still currently ongoing and being investigated. So the reason why I know who Peggy Sweeten is, or have heard of her, A, because there have been lots of news stories about her recently, and B, my mom actually taught at the same school that she did and crossed paths with her. They taught together at a school in Kansas. I won't name the school or the district because that information is not easy to find online. I think if you were a good investigative journalist, you could put it together and figure out where she worked. But again, because that information is not readily available online, I won't say that. But yes, they taught together at a school district in Kansas. My mom moved away from that district, I think it was about 8 years before Peggy went missing. So my mom was not there at the time she went missing, but my mom did know of her and knew the area. So Peggy Sweeten, she was a special education teacher, or at least was certified to be a special education teacher. My mom couldn't remember if she was actually teaching special education at the time she taught with her or if she was just a teacher in the school. But regardless, she had a history of teaching special education classes. She was described as being very soft-spoken, really nice, just an all-around kind person. So Peggy was last seen in Grove, Oklahoma on January 17th, 1998. She was 52 years old at the time of her disappearance, and she was, at that time, was living with her husband, James Lee Sweeten. Some of the stories I pulled information from referred to him as Jim, and some referred to him as James. So just FYI, if I say Jim and James are the same, they're the same person. I'll try to say James, but if I accidentally say Jim, they're the same person. So they lived, at the time of her disappearance, they lived in a lakefront home at Four Seasons Resort on Grand Lake. So I wondered about this because Grove, Oklahoma is obviously not Kansas, and other news stories stated that James Sweeten was a superintendent at a Kansas school. So I wondered, okay, if he was at a superintendent at a Kansas school, the last time my mom taught with Peggy was at a Kansas school, but she's disappearing from Grove, Oklahoma, what's the deal there? And I couldn't find, again, this is the first place where me not being an investigative journalist maybe made some things difficult for me, because I couldn't find an explanation for why everything, and this will come into play more later in the story as to why it's important that it was the Kansas school that he was working at. But I couldn't find any explanation for why she disappeared from Grove, Oklahoma, while her husband was allegedly still, or I'm assuming was still a superintendent at that time at the Kansas school. The only thing I can come up with is that the town in Kansas, the district where they were teaching at and where Jim was a superintendent, was about an hour from Grove, Oklahoma, and she disappears on a Saturday. January 17th, 1998 was a Saturday. So the only thing I can piece together is that maybe it's a lake house. Most people don't like live in a lake house full time. A lake house is like a vacation home, or it's somewhere you live after you retire. So maybe this was like somewhere they went on the weekends or went every now and then. I don't know. And that is just mere speculation. I have nothing to confirm that. That was just a question I had when I was reading through, was, is he still working in Kansas at this time? Or are they living in Grove full time? Is he commuting back and forth around an hour every day? I had questions about that I couldn't get answered. And so my personal theory that has no basis on anything and is absolutely meaningless beyond my own head, is that maybe they were just staying in this lake house part-time, and that at least her husband was still working as a superintendent at the time. I don't know. That's my own filling in the gaps. So do with that information what you will. So at the time of her disappearance, her husband, James, stated he returned home from a work-related conference to find her gone. So again, he was a superintendent at a Kansas school, and he told investigators like multiple times that he had returned from an educational conference. And when he returned home, he found a note that he claims was written by Peggy saying she was leaving to be with a man she met online. And again, they've been married for 33 years at the time of her disappearance. So he's saying that she is leaving her 33-year marriage to go and be with a man she met online. More on the online part of that later. He also said that Peggy left her wedding rings along with the note. And it's also important to note that it wasn't just the wedding rings she left, it was all of her personal belongings, including her car and her clothing and photos and mementos. Like nothing was missing from the property that belonged to her. She had left all of it to leave and go be with somebody else. Since that date in 1998 in January, she has never been heard from again at all. So 3 weeks after Peggy goes missing, James files for divorce. And the divorce is granted in April because Peggy does not show up to court. Allegedly because she's run off with somebody else, according to James. So it's around this time that we also learn James was having an affair with another married woman at the time, or he was having an affair with a woman that was also married at the time of Peggy's disappearance. So allegedly they were already having the affair before she ever disappeared. I won't say her name because she is not an active suspect in this case. You can find her name online, but again, at this time, I don't think police have any reason to suspect that she had something to do with why Peggy has disappeared. So I won't say her name. I won't bring her into it. So James is filed and granted his divorce in April. This other woman also divorces her husband in April. She and James move in together in June 1998, and then they are married December 27th, 1998 in Las Vegas. So James is moving on very quickly after his wife's disappearance. So the couples had an adult son together, whose name was Patrick. And he says that he has not spoken to his mother since December 1997. James doesn't tell Patrick that Peggy has gone missing until March 1998. March. She goes missing in January. He doesn't tell his own son that his mother has left until March, but okay. And so then it isn't until June of that year that Patrick finally convinces, and it's more like he forces his father to file a missing persons report. So that's 5 months, right? February, March, April, May, June. 5 months after she has gone missing. I think that's odd. I think anyone would think that is odd. And especially because it's like, even if I am James, and in theory, if this is really true, that she ran off with somebody that she met online, I'm her husband of 33 years, you're telling me I'm not the least bit concerned that I've just never heard from her again? Like, I feel like I would be concerned. I'd be confused as to why I'm not hearing about her. And even if it's like, okay, well, she really doesn't want to be with me and that's why she left, like, I feel like you would still be worried. That would still be worrying. You would tell somebody, but he doesn't. And he doesn't file a missing persons report until 5 months later, but okay. So this is the next place where I have some questions that I didn't get answered, because on the internet, from what I have access to, because again, I have this wall up because I'm not in the US, I'm in the EU, information just kind of stops here at this point. I don't know what happens after they file the missing persons report. According to the internet, nothing happens. So I don't know if they just like, she's an adult, and so they say, okay, well, she's an adult, and everything allegedly points to the fact that she is left of her own will. They haven't found a body at any point. They have no reason to believe that she's dead at that point. They have no suspects. So I guess maybe it just does pause there. It just goes cold. I don't know. I couldn't figure out what happened after they filed the missing persons report, because nothing pops up again until September 2011. That's a good chunk of time after that missing persons report. So I don't know. And I don't know why in 2011. So I'll tell you, in 2011, police returned back to James's house, that house in Grove, Oklahoma, where Peggy has gone missing from, after Patrick urges them to do so. I could not find an explanation for why Patrick chooses to urge, like why Patrick all of a sudden is urging them to go and search. And it could have been that like Patrick has been urging them this whole time, and just now for whatever reason they decide to. I couldn't figure out if there was like a reason why Patrick said, no, you need to go check it out again. Like if Patrick learned something else. I just don't know, but for whatever reason, police go back into September 2011. So, and they go back specifically to dig underneath this shed that James has built, and he built it really shortly after the disappearance of Peggy. So, and they find some sort of like an anomaly under the shed using, I don't know what it's called, like ground radar technology. They find an anomaly under the shed, but the only thing they find from that is a tree root. Like they don't find anything. And then it's also around this time in 2011, I found, or it says that Patrick is now telling police like he does not believe his father's story about his mother's disappearance, and he thinks his father may have done something to hurt his mother. It's also at this point where, Patrick may have told police this initially, but the articles word it as if he's just telling them this now, but I have a feeling he probably told them this initially as well. But because of these now articles about the 2011 dig, he states that his mom didn't really use the internet. Very specifically says like, she didn't know how to work a computer or use the internet And like, she didn't even have an email address. She didn't even use email. Which really calls into question this whole idea that she's met somebody online. And this is when I got thinking, and this is when my Gen Z, like, I needed some expert advice from someone older than me, because I started trying to think like, okay, it's 1998. What can you do on a computer at that point where you're meeting people? Because I Googled, and like, MySpace didn't come out until 2003. And to my understanding, that was like the first big like social networking site. And maybe I'm wrong. Like, again, I was not there at that time. I don't know. But in my head, I was like, I don't feel like there was a lot going on the internet that you could easily meet people. Especially if you were not good with computers and weren't on computers a lot. And my mom, when I was talking to my mom, because I also asked her about this, she said it was like very rare at that time, and especially in like this region of the country, that like most people didn't have a computer in their home. Like, that was really rare in the late 90s. Also, my mom and I were discussing like, okay, let's say she did meet somebody online. How would she have done that? And the only thing my mom and I could come up with, or my mom, not me, I don't know. I have no idea what was going on the internet at that time. But according to my mom, chat rooms were like the big thing then. I know, I'm so sorry to anybody that's like older than me that's watching this video. I probably sound so stupid and young, but I was told about the chat rooms that would have existed at that time, and that's how, like, if you were going to meet somebody online at that time, it would have been like through a chat room. One thing that I had a question about was, okay, she's not good at computers. Even if she wanted to meet somebody, it's like, why would she choose to do it online if she's like not very skilled at it? And also, it's like with any new technology, like I think about today, it's usually like the younger people that are like doing it first, you know, because it's like, it's new, and so it's cool for the younger people. Typically, like, the older age groups are not as interested in what like the youngest people are interested in. And so I was like, would someone her age have even been interested in being in a chat room? Like, there's just so many things about it that I'm like, that doesn't make sense, but okay. But beyond the fact that she's bad at computers and her husband is saying she met somebody online, her son was even alleging that like she leaves this typed up, printed out note. And he's even alleging that he's like, I don't know that she would have been able to do that. Like, he was like, I literally don't know if she could have been able to use her computer well enough to even type up a note and print it out. And it's like, if we're talking about how people didn't have personal computers at the time, maybe they had a personal computer in the home, but otherwise it's like she would have had to like print it out at school or the local library. You know, it's like, why wouldn't somebody that didn't like using computers, why would their preferred method of leaving a note be to do it the hardest, most difficult way for themselves? Like, why would she make it more difficult for herself? Why wouldn't she leave a handwritten note? So I think that's like the first major hole in James's story. So also in 2011, when police go out to search the home, James refuses to take a polygraph test, which there are enough red flags without me being concerned about him not wanting to take a polygraph test. Just because it's like, we know, polygraph tests not admissible in court. They're notoriously not the most reliable. I don't know even if I was an innocent person, I would be wary to take a polygraph. So it doesn't, to me, seeing him not take a polygraph doesn't make him look any more guilty, especially because it's like there's already so many red flags and questions that I'm like, okay, the polygraph not taking it is just like one more thing on top of it. So, but he also refuses to allow a search of his Grove, Oklahoma property. I think they get a warrant anyways, but he doesn't allow them to search it willingly. So, in a quote from detectives or investigators at the time, when they were questioning him again in 2011, this is a direct quote. They said, or allegedly a direct quote again. I don't know that I'm a great investigative journalist, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. But they say James appeared deceptive and evasive and appeared to be trying to find out how far the investigation had progressed and what investigators knew and what direction the investigation was headed. So that was written in the search warrant in 2011, allegedly, I think. So at this point, I think authorities decide Peggy was most likely a homicide victim, and James is considered a person of interest in her presumed death. Again, they have never found a body, so it's like you can't make any sort of an official ruling on what her status is as far as being alive or dead. Authorities believe that James Sweeten was the last person to see Peggy alive, and her case remains unsolved. So that was in 2011. So flash forward to April 2023, this April. So it's been 25 years now since Peggy initially went missing. So I have here in the story another question that I wasn't able to get answered, probably won't get answered. In the stories, the most recent news stories, it just says recent information prompted like a reopened search, a reopened case. I don't know what that recent information was. I don't have any way to find it. That was all it said. So something made investigators decide to do another search. And this time, it was Delaware County Coroner Mark Wall and Sheriff Beck. It didn't give a first name for Sheriff Beck, I guess. I don't know. So, but this time they are searching the Four Seasons Pier, which was located near Peggy and James's home. So they lived at the Four Seasons Resort, and this is the Four Seasons Pier. So the water in the lake near their home, or their former home. So they search this and they find a barrel or drum standing upright and partially submerged in a cove. Sheriff Beck had a lot of questions about the position of the barrel, and we'll talk more about that in a second. So I don't know if this information, I think from what I can understand from the articles, Patrick told authorities this information in 1998. I think it seems that maybe like investigators didn't know what to do with that information or didn't have any like lead to follow with it. And so it wasn't ever really like released or told to the public until now. So in 1998, I think Patrick Sweeten reports noticing a 55-gallon drum on his parents' property suddenly went missing. And this is sometime after her disappearance. And Patrick says he questions his father about where this drum barrel has gone. But James said, I have no idea. Don't know anything about it. Not my problem. So that was a dead end for Patrick at the time. So authorities continue like operations to remove at least part of the drum out of the water because they are assuming it might contain clues regarding the disappearance of Peggy. So they partially recovered part of the drum, and it is the same 55-gallon size drum as what Patrick reported missing. So they recovered part of it on May 15th of this year. But no remains were found in the drum. But Sheriff Beck, this is when he says he's questioning the position, or the position of the barrel leaves him with questions after finding out that it's empty, because he says something had to weigh it down for it to be upright all these years. What probably has happened is whatever weighted it down has been washed away. So that was May 15th. They say there's nothing in it. Thursday, May 18th, 2 days ago now. It's May 20th today that I'm recording this. So Thursday, May 18th. I don't know if this was a call sent to like 911 or if this was a call sent directly to the Weslaco Police Department. But either way, James Sweeten calls police and says that he is planning on harming himself. So Weslaco Police Department sends out officers, and they arrive at the Southern Comfort RV Park. I'm assuming this is where he was living at the time, and they found him dead with what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. So authorities also say they found his body in a shed right near his residence. At first, reading that, I was like, oh, is that the same shed that they were searching under all those years ago? And then I realized, no, we're talking about a different house, different property. So I don't believe it's the same shed. In case you had the same question I did, pretty sure it's not the same shed. So, they're currently still investigating that incident, and they haven't actually released a cause of death. They've just made statements that it appears to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound, especially considering he had called authorities like minutes before saying he had planned to hurt himself in some way. So again, Delaware County Coroner Mark Wall, that has been working on the case and was part of the team that initiated the search to find the 55-gallon barrel. He says he believes that James Sweeten's story began to unravel and he was feeling threatened, and that is why James did what he did. Mark Wall said, "We were able to poke a hole in his alibi." So apparently the Kansas Unified School District, where he would have been the superintendent, confirmed that the only conference that took place in January 1998 was 2 weeks after Peggy's disappearance. So if you remember, his whole alibi is that he came home after an education-related conference, work conference, to find her missing. And so the Kansas school district that he would have worked for said they did not know of any conference that would have happened at that time. There was no explanation for what conference he would have been at. And also on top of that, investigators have still, to this day, never been able to confirm that Peggy Sweeten had an email account. And on top of that, I think it was released in police reports, I read it somewhere, that Peggy's social security number had never been used for anything ever again, or had never popped up anywhere after that time where she disappeared. So if she has disappeared, she's living under a fake identity or something. So authorities didn't say whether or not he had left a note of any kind, but they did say if he did something to Peggy, he didn't take responsibility for it, and he didn't say where her remains are. So that is the whole case as of right now. There's a lot of things about it that I think you look at it and it just feels very obvious. And it's I hate to say, it's you don't want to say and speculate and just make claims. But this is one of those cases where you look at all the facts, you read everything, and it's really hard to ignore what everything is pointing to. Again, they have never declared Peggy Sweeten as being dead, I don't think. They never found her body. But I would be really shocked if she really was still alive somewhere, unfortunately. And I think now, if James did do it, if they ever can prove that and confirm that, there'll be lots of things that there'll be the why, and there'll be so many things that you'll never get answered because he is not there to answer them for you. And I also think it'll be really hard to get justice for Peggy because James is no longer here to stand trial. So if there are any updates on this case at any point, I will share them. I don't know. It's really sad, and my video isn't really gonna, I didn't solve the case. I'm not gonna solve the case, but I just wanted to talk about her, just because you never know like who is going to see a video and who's going to remember something, or who's going to say, oh, I know something, but I'd never said, I should say now. Like, you just don't know. And I think the true crime, I don't want to call it a genre, but the true crime category, I think a lot of people, you know, like there's positives and negatives, but I think one positive is that it gets people talking about cases that maybe otherwise people wouldn't talk about. So that is why I made this video, and that's why I wanted to tell this story. So on that note, if you know anything about or have any information about the disappearance of Peggy Sweeten, contact Delaware County Sheriff's Office and give them that information. I really hope that there's some amount of justice or some, you know, ability for this case to be solved, but I don't know that there will ever be justice in like the typical sense of the word. And I'm very sorry for her family, and it really saddens me that people do things like this. That's all I have for you today, so thank you for watching. Hopefully if I ever have to make an update about this case, it will be some sort of positive news. All right, bye.